Between the two of them, the inside of Coates, Parker gets too heavily involved. And that's Whitehead and Coates.
Just a good old boy, never meaning no harm. Beats all you never saw, been in trouble with the law since the day they was born. Straightening the curves, flattening the hills. Someday the mountain might get them, but the law never will. Making their way the only way they know how. That's just a little bit more than the law will allow. Just a good old boy, they wouldn't change if they could. Fighting the system like a true modern day Robin Hood.
We'll turn this around. We'll turn this around. We'll turn this around. We'll turn this around. We'll turn this around.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second week of racing in the AGON by AOC Mazda MX5 Cup. The US tour continues here on the VRRC, and we move into our first of several 40-minute pit stop races over the course of the season. We kicked things off a week ago with two 20-minute sprint races around Laguna Seca, and today we arrive at Road America, a classic circuit, a circuit that is perfect for these Mazda MX5s. Expecting a fascinating race coming up in a little while. It's Andy McEwan and Jack Oliphant talking you through all of the action. Jack, looking forward to this one. We got a taste, I think, of what these MX5s are capable of at Laguna Seca a week ago, but this circuit, a completely different challenge, and I think one that is going to produce quite the race for us to enjoy.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't actually raced at Road America very often in the time that I've been involved in sort of sim racing, and obviously never done it in real life. So I am looking forward to it. The one time I did race it, it was in an MX5, but it was on a different platform. And I had a little bit of a bash with the MX5 yesterday at the VRRC Centre at Silverstone with the KERS and everything like that, the hybrid boost, and I do think it's going to lend itself to this track very, very well. There's going to be some really exciting overtaking opportunities into turn one, and the rear end is really quite loose, as we saw a week ago. So those sort of infield Sector 2 and Sector 3 sections are going to be really interesting.
Yeah, certainly. It is a difficult circuit. It's a long lap, a very high-speed lap. And as you can see from the little circuit map there, we'll get a proper look at the track in a little moment, but you can see there are lots of long straights and lots of opportunities to grab the slipstream. The same is true, actually, of lots of the circuits that we're visiting on the calendar this season. As I said, we kicked off at Laguna Seca, but that circuit kind of atypical, really, compared to the other circuits we've got on the calendar, in that it's tight, it's twisty, it's undulating. It's not really in line with many of the other American circuits that we'll be visiting. Road America this weekend, then the Circuit of the Americas in Texas. We go back to our two sprint race format for that one, for another 40-minute race at Road Atlanta. Bridgehampton will be a very interesting midway point, a circuit that I'm certainly not familiar with at all, but looks like, again, it will produce some good slipstreaming action there. Certainly we'll see the same at Sebring, and then we head to VIR, the Virginia International Raceway, and Watkins Glen to round out the season, the full layout at Watkins Glen, which I'm sure will provide a fitting closer to the championship, and from what we've seen so far, looks like that championship could well go all the way. Some interesting tracks on the schedule there, Jack, and I really do think that America is the perfect place, really, to race these Mazda MX-5s out. The circuits in America, perfect for this style of racing.
It's also perfect for VRRC members because we haven't often travelled over to America and done many of the circuits in any of our championships. So we've done the MX5 before, but we've never done it with a hybrid. And we've done a couple of the tracks, but we've never done them with the MX5 hybrid as well. So it's going to throw a new test at them. But there is a driver that seemed to have got to grips with the car pretty quickly around Laguna Seca as well. We'll go on to the championship standings in a second, but I'm interested to see whether Eric Axelsson is able to harness the pace that he had at Laguna Seca and chuck it around Road America as well.
Yeah, he was certainly on form a week ago, was Eric Axelsson. If he is continuing to be on form this weekend, and indeed through the rest of the season, then he's got some pretty tasty prizes that he's got a very good chance of taking. You can see there the trophies. We do still have VRRC trophies for our top three finishers in the championship, but we have prizes, actual physical prizes on hand as well, courtesy of our sponsors AGON, the 24-inch display for the third placed driver in the championship, a 27-inch display for the runner-up, but the champion will be receiving a 34-inch curved gaming display courtesy of AGON to transform their sim setup and really help with their immersion, and yeah, that's something that of the drivers will be keen to take, and it looks like being a very competitive run for the championship, because last time out at Laguna Seca, yes, Eric Axelsson was certainly the dominant driver. He came out as the top point scorer over the night from pole position in race one. He won that race and then came from the back of the grid in race two to finish in second place, a race that was won by Kyle Felvers. But Felvers actually had very similar results because he also had a win in race 2 and a second place in race 1. So actually, he and Axelsson coming out of that reasonably close on points, only the 7 points between them after the first 2 races, with Elliot Dalton-Ayres a further 9 back in third, 1 podium and 1 top 5. But across those first 2 races, we had 4 different drivers scoring podiums, 6 different drivers who managed to get inside the top 5, and some very, very competitive racing throughout. So no strong favourite for the championship as of yet, although it is clear that Axelsson will take some beating, Jack.
It absolutely is. He seemed pretty invulnerable, I'd say, through qualifying and race 1. And then all of a sudden, Carl Felvis sort of turned the wick up a little bit in race 2, and he was able to get that victory. Maybe there was an argument to say he was holding on a bit. If there was one more lap, he was in a little bit of trouble, but he got the victory, and that's what's important. You can see the championship standings on your screen now, actually. And obviously, we've only had 1 week. So Eric Axelson on top, Carl Felvis and Elliot Daltonez are your top 3, like we just saw. Ethan Hill, though, and Nicky Taylor round out the top 5. Look how close it is between 4th, 5th, and 6th. Josh Martin in there as well. 34 points for Ethan Hill, all the way down to Josh Martin with 32 points. So 3 drivers separated by just 2 points. Joel Lask, Jens Verhoeven, Simon Thorpe, Sam Zero, who unfortunately won't be joining us tonight, as well as a few other drivers, but they are due to return to the championship after this week. And John Jones is in 11th place. There's a few other drivers, Paul Laramie, Reese Bell, Alec Leingar, and Andy Carroll. Kenny Press as well are in the championship. As I said, a few absentees tonight, Andy, but I'm sure we'll be back with the full strength grid next week.
Yeah, work commitments getting in the way for a couple of drivers, but they're all keen to get back behind the wheel of their hybrid Mazda MX-5s. These cars, not your standard MX-5 that we've seen racing here on the VRRC in the past. It's still based on the 2016 Mazda MX-5 Cup car, the original coming with its 2-litre engine, 160 brake horsepower roughly, with a hard tyre compound only and very little in the way of adjustments. You couldn't adjust things like brake bias or differential, for example, on the original MX-5, but Rich at the VRRC, who I still maintain has far too much free time on his hands, has been tinkering away with the MX-5 to bring it bang up to date. So the 2-litre inline engine remains, but no longer normally aspirated. The turbo attached, producing an extra 80 brake horsepower, roughly, and an extra 100 newton meters of torque. Then we add in the hybrid, which adds an extra 50 brake horsepower on top of that. The drivers can use that hybrid system for 10 seconds on 15 separate occasions over the course of the race. There is a 2-second cooldown period, between uses, but in theory, there's nothing stopping them from using that hybrid multiple times on the same lap. We've also given them freedom of tyre compounds. That's going to be very interesting tonight, being the fact that this is a longer pit stop race, the soft, medium, and hard compound tyres that all behave slightly differently. Plus, they have fully adjustable brake bias and fully adjustable differentials to help them really hone in the car's handling. They will need to do so here tonight because the Road America circuit is not an easy track to get right. A very, very demanding circuit, a long lap as well, high speed down those long straights, but it is just important to carry the speed out onto those straights, and I believe we can take a look now at how it ought to be done with our hot lap around the Road America circuit.
Hello everyone, welcome to the second track guide of the AGON by AOC MX5 Turbo Cup. We are here at Road America, beginning the lap now. It's all about hitting your gear shift points and potentially picking up a slipstream from your fellow racer to help give you some extra straight line speed. Into turn 1, we brake down 1 gear. Don't get too greedy with either the apex or the exit curbs, as both can unsettle the car. We head now down towards turn 3. It's all about getting the car rotated early, so we're early on the brakes, we turn it in nice and early, and we get back to the power very early. It's really important to get the exit here, as there's a long flat out section down to turn 5. Any time you can gain on the exit will continue all the way down this straight. Again, another strong opportunity for some slipstream from those around you. Into turn 5 now, we go down 2 gears. We're going to get the car rotated quite early and then back to the power nice and early, using up all of the exit curb. Turn 6, you want to brake at the top of the hill here, get it rotated quite early here. You might have to fight a little bit of oversteer, but it won't cost you any momentum. Turn 7 is an easy flat out kink with no real difficulties. It's all about minimising steering lock. Into turn 8, you want to get the car rotated quite early and power through the corner, as that's the line I found works the fastest. Into the carousel now. The first part is all about keeping it on the right line with the right momentum, so you're balancing the car with the throttle and the brake. You find a point that you're comfortable at and pin the throttle to the floor and then slingshot out of the corner. And again, another important acceleration zone, as we've got a big, long, flat-out section. So any time you gain on the exit will continue all the way down this section into turn 12, which is Canada Corner, which we are coming up to right now. Again, another slipstreaming opportunity. Down 2 gears, get the car rotated fairly early again. Seems to be a big theme of Road America. Don't want to use too much of the exit curve, as that will slow the momentum down. 13 is an easy flat-out left-hander. It's all about getting back over onto the right line for the final corner, which we want to really prioritise the exit on massively, as there's a big hill and a long straight. So we're back onto the throttle nice and early, and now it's all about going through the motions, hopefully picking up to slipstream, and that concludes the lap of Road America.
Well, an excellent guided tour of the Road America circuit there by Lewis Edwards, who's also our director for the season. So he's the one bringing you all of these lovely pictures of the cars as they make their way around on their outlap now for this 15-minute qualifying session. We're into the session now, but no lap times having been set yet, because as we saw there, Jack, it's a long lap here at Road America, especially in these MX5s. They may be a lot quicker now than they used to be, but it's still going to take, I think, in excess of 2 minutes to get round here. And that, in a qualifying session that's only 15 minutes long, can be a bit of a head-scratcher for the drivers, can't it? Because if you get things wrong on your first qualifying lap, for example, it's a long way around before you get to have another crack at it.
Exactly, and if you want to be able to come in and maybe do a pit stop and change the tyres or change some kind of settings on the brake bias or differential or something, then you really are sort of scuppering yourself, really. You're putting the pressure on majorly. I think these sort of tracks, practice is even more important. Let's say like a Brands Hatch Indy or something like that. You can go out, you can do 10 laps in about 5 minutes, and you come in, change the tyres, and you can sort of go and crack on again and see what lap times you can do. Here, like you said, if you mess up one corner and you mess it up badly enough, it could ruin an entire lap. You're having to wait effectively 5 minutes until you set a reasonable lap time. You have to finish the one you're on, then you have to go out there, correct your mistake, hope you don't make any more, and then you've got a representative time. But all of a sudden, a third of your time has absolutely gone.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a frustrating business, let me tell you, and especially because you're often very reliant on other people around here, because we keep talking about this slipstream. It is particularly pertinent in these cars, and especially around a circuit like this. I think it is worth trying to pair up with somebody, and certainly if you're a member of a team such as HFT Racing, who have a number of cars on the grid, then it certainly makes sense for those drivers to work together. Eric Axelson, though, interestingly, not in that position. Now, he does have a teammate on the grid, Elliot Dalton-Ayres. They may run different liveries, but they're both entered under the same team name. However, they've not found each other on the track, have they? Axelson going it alone. He's got someone just about within his slipstream there behind, but no tow for Axelson. However, Jack, if we know one thing about Eric, it's that he knows how to qualify. He's not been quite as fast, though, in the practice sessions this week, and a part of that is because we have now lumbered him with an extra 25 kilos of success ballast, because he was our top scorer last week, so he has to carry more ballast in this week for round number 2. How much of an effect do you think that might be having around a circuit like this one?
I think it's going to have a pretty big effect, to be honest. It's obviously, we've just seen him go up the hill and, put it on provisional pole for the time being. It's actually Josh Martin behind him, picking up that slipstream, who's just gone second as well. I think it's going to be really important, not only going up to the start-finish line, but into the heavy braking zones as well. And obviously, as you know, Andy, having commentated on motorsport for so many years, you end up with a lot of weight. You end up sort of having to brake a couple of yards earlier, and that's going to hurt him when he comes to overtaking. It's going to hurt him when he comes to defending, and with the lack of hybrid, I should say, in qualifying, he can't sort of get away with it with the tactical use of the hybrid. He's just sort of lumbered with this weight and has to get on and deal with it. So he's doing very, very well, in my opinion, to be in first place for the time being, but the majority of the drivers are in this train trying to get themselves up to speed as well. So don't expect Eric to have it all his own way. Maybe 6.5 tenths for the time being. It's going to come down.
Indeed so, and in the races that will be really interesting, the use of hybrid, because there are lots of places where you could choose to use it, but of course you can't afford to be using it down every straight away, because then you'll run out long before you even get halfway through the race, and that will be interesting. Right, this is much more like what I expected to see. A big group of MX5s all running together. You've got Joel Lask here, who is an independent runner, and he has tagged along with the HFT Racing boys. Now, this is a really smart tactic, actually, for Joel. He may not be a part of their team, but if you're out there on your own with no teammates, then the best thing you can do is try and form a temporary alliance with one of the bigger teams and tow around with them in the qualifying session. So Joel Lask trying to do that now. And let's see whether or not it's going to work. He's just headed out of the carousel down towards the fearsome right-hander at the kink. If you get this wrong, then there is next to no runoff area on the exit. It's certainly not a part of the circuit you want to be going side by side through in the race later on. And then again, you get this long drag all the way up towards Canada corner. Hard on the brakes. The slipstream benefiting you to the tune of several tenths of a second down there, but meaning you arrive at the braking zone that little bit faster than you're expecting. They all seem to manage that well, and they're all starting to close in on Andy Carroll, who is the unlucky man here, who doesn't have anyone to tow from. If I were him there, Jack, I would have over towards the end of the lap and see if they will repay the favour on the start of the next one. He's not done that. He's going to tow them right up the hill, though, and I suspect all three cars behind him are about to go faster than him.
Yeah, and Andy Carroll's not in a particularly good position in terms of his qualifying pace at the moment either. He's in 11th place, but as they all cross the line, that might all get jumbled up. And of course it does. Axelson's still on pole by about 0.3 of a second, but Nicky Taylor's now gone second. Carl Felvis is in third. Josh Martin's in fourth now. And Joel Lask is in fifth. Three of those names that I've just read out, we've been watching on that particular lap. So you are absolutely correct in the way that you sort of want to work together with some people, Andy. But still, top of the times by 2.5 seconds is a driver who doesn't need any help, and it's still Eric Axelson.
He's not had a slipstream all session, and he's still a quarter of a second faster than the rest. So Eric Axelson, king of qualifying, I think we might need to call him the king of the VRRC at the moment, because he is proving to be the class of the field. Nicky Taylor goes second, then Felvis third, Martin fourth, Lask fifth, Dalton Ayres sixth, ahead of Verhoeven, Iyengar, Carroll and John Jones to round out the top 10. Eric Axelson pushing hard again on this lap. Of course, there are pros and cons to running in the slipstream, Jack. I mentioned it there as we were following that pack down towards Canada corner. When you're in the slipstream, you pick up so much extra speed down the straight. It is very easy, actually, to outbrake yourself when you get to the next braking zone. So Eric Axelson, it does strike me as a very smooth driver, a very rhythm-based driver. You know, I think he kind of likes going it alone, not having any distractions, and he knows he's ultimately got the pace to be able to run strong lap times regardless of the tow. He's not actually on an improved lap time for the time being, but Eric, I think perhaps just finds it a little bit simpler maybe to go out there on his own.
Yeah, well, if you're the fastest and you don't really want any driver in front of you, because another problem with running in the pack is if the driver who's at the very front of the pack, you want them to be a couple of tenths quicker than the person who's second in the pack, and you want them to be a couple of tenths quicker than the person who's third in the pack, and you all sort of tow each other along. Otherwise, you're catching them up as into really important braking zones and really important parts of the circuit, and that's potentially why the likes of Nicky Taylor, Carl Felvis and Joel Lask were a touch down on potentially what they think they can do in the car, because they were chasing Andy Carroll, and with all due respect to Andy, he's not necessarily probably going to turn up tonight and win off the first race. He might well do very well in the reverse grid, but he's not quite got the pace to be on pole position. So the fact that those guys caught Andy up may have just hampered them just a touch going into the final corner, and that ruins the run up the hill, and all of a sudden you are struggling a little bit. Here is Eric's teammate, Elliot Dalton Ayres. We've already mentioned him once so far. The majority of the people have come into the pits. Elliot hasn't. He also hasn't improved either. And you would have to suspect, Andy, that he doesn't have any more time to come into the pits now. It's now or never. And Elliot's just going to have to keep going around on the tyres that he's on.
Yes, and that is the risk of towing around with people who aren't on your team, because he did not get the memo there, did he? The rest of them all pitted, and he stayed out, so he's now got no slipstream. Like you said, by the time he's finished this lap, he won't have time to come in and change tyres and try and get another tow, so I fear that Elliot might well have gone about as quickly as he's going to be able to now. Axelson then looking good at the top of the tree, but Elliot Dalton Ayres certainly will be a factor in the races, I think. 6th place is further down than he would have liked to have qualified. Managed managed to qualify third a week ago at Laguna Seca, converted that into third place in race 1, fought his way through for a fourth in race 2. So Elliott certainly is going to be a factor, I think, over the course of tonight and indeed the rest of the season, even if he has to come from a bit deeper down the field. But track position, I think, Jack, will be a little bit less important here than it was a week ago at Laguna Seca. Not the easiest of places to pass Laguna Seca, but here at Road America, there are ample opportunities to get that run and find a way past the cars ahead.
Yeah, there's plenty of room either side, isn't there? I mean, you can imagine the cars going 3 wide. There are definitely positions where you don't want to go 3 wide through the kink like you were alluding to before. But yeah, there's every opportunity. If a driver goes towards the inside, there's plenty of room on the outside to try and carry momentum and hold it. And obviously there's lots of overtaking opportunities to dive up the inside, coming down the hill like we are here through the double left. Or into Canada corner, into the first corner. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think it's going to be as important to get that qualifying position, but everybody always likes to take that momentum and that confidence into the race, don't they? Especially if they're within a couple of tenths of the pole position. That would really help, because at the moment, only the top 6 are separated by less than a second. Normally at VRRC, we're used to seeing that being the top 12 or 13 drivers, so it's a little bit spread out tonight.
It is, and again, I think that is just because it's such a long lap here, but
Yes.
We may well see things change, because the HFT drivers have got themselves back out of the pit lane. They're going to just about cross the line with time for one more lap, and they're all on the soft tyres as well, so those tyres should be up temperature. Actually, Lewis was giving me some information before we went live earlier on this evening about those tyres, and apparently the issue that the drivers are having around here is not so much tyre wear or tyre overheating. It's actually the exact opposite problem, and it's keeping the temperature in the tyres, because the straights here are so long and you don't work the tyres all that hard at all. They're actually finding that the tyres are cooling down the more laps they run, which is just something completely different for them to try and get their heads around. So for that reason, Jack, I expect to see those soft tyres staying on the cars for when we get into the race later on, because if I were the drivers out there and I knew that keeping temperature in the tyres was tricky, I'd want the softest compound possible, have that early run speed, and hopefully keep the temperature in them over the course of the race.
You're absolutely right, and you know, we don't need to change tyre compound. This isn't Formula 1. We do have a mandatory pit stop, but we don't need to run hard soft or medium soft or anything like that. They can go soft, and because it is a virtual race, they don't have to pay for the tyres, so that's all well and good for the drivers as well. Yeah, I'm interested to see how it's going to run as a dynamic here tonight, whether drivers sort of take an early pit stop, whether they take a late pit stop, or whether they just plan to just go bang in the middle, whether teams work together as well. So we're seeing Kyle and Nicky here working together in qualify. Will they work together in the actual race as well? All these questions are going to be answered, but I believe Lewis was even telling us that the pit window is any time that isn't lap 1 or the last lap, you can pit. So the 36 minutes or the 35 minutes in between, then you can pit. So yeah, it's going to be wide open in terms of tactics.
Yeah, certainly. You cannot pit at the end of lap 1, as you say, and you can't leave it till the start of the last lap either, but anywhere in between, you're free to pit. And if the tyres aren't wearing particularly, then you have much more freedom on when you can pit. However, there are other restrictions, there are other limitations to your strategy. Like you say, do you want to be pitting on your own? I wouldn't want to pit on my own. I'd always want to be pitting with someone of a similar speed to me, and that's where, like you say, very much true that teamwork and team play could come in handy. Right then, we are not quite ready to see the checkered flag actually in this session. The drivers will have time to get one more lap in, at least the drivers that we're following now. Joel Lask there closing in on a car ahead. Car pulls to the right though and opts to try and sit in his slipstream, but with not a brilliant run over the top of the hill, so I'm not sure how effective that will be. Anyway, Lask comes to the line. 5th place is where he was. He's had a bit of a toe on this lap. Is it enough to improve? No, a 2 minutes 20.2 keeps him in 5th position. What about the HFT drivers? Felver stays in 3rd position. In fact, I think they're just going on to a lap now. So Kyle Felvers, these two running very, very close together, and Kyle gets out of the way just as they go into turn number 1. That was smart driving, and of course it scuppers his lap, but it means that at least his teammate has a clear run through the first part of the lap, and we'll wait and see whether or not this is going to work for them. But Kyle Felvers, we know, is not going to improve upon 3rd place.
Well, this is the thing I was talking about before, really, is the fact that you want the driver in front to just be that couple of tenths quicker than the driver in 2nd place. And I think Kyle and Nicky, they look like they're arguing over who that is going to be, who is the ultimately quicker driver, they're very, very equal. A couple of drivers have taken the checker flag. Jens Verhoeven, Iyengar in 8th place as well, and Andy Carroll in 9th, Reece Bell in 10th. So a couple of drivers have finished their qualifying lap, but the majority of the, let's say, protagonists, the top 6 runners at the moment, are a long way off finishing their lap. So a lot can go wrong here, and, well, Nicky Taylor very nearly projecting that as well, because he almost sent it too loose on the exit there.
I think Kyle Felvis is actually pushing Nicky around this lap, isn't he? And now, I don't think there is a rule against that in VRRC or indeed Assetto Corsa competition, not Assetto Corsa Competizione, if you see what I mean. But I don't think there is actually anything wrong with doing that on this sim, whereas other sims will punish you for making contact in qualifying, even if it's contact of a helpful variety. So, yeah, I think that was the plan there, down some of the long straights for Felvis to help Nicky along, see whether or not that was going to help improve his speed down the straight and his lap time. They might just be picking up a small toe, actually, from the 2 cars just up the road, mightn't they? I think that's Josh Martin and Joel Lask again, isn't it, together? And we'll see whether or not that is going to benefit Taylor, who drops down into Canada corner through the 90-degree right-hander. Plenty of curb on the way in, plenty on the way out as well. And then up through this really tricky penultimate turn, over a blind crest, the car goes light, understeers wide. There is a handy bit of tarmac runoff area there, though, if you do go too wide. And then a difficult right-hander to end the lap as well. Late apex, carry the speed up the hill. That slipstream again can buy you another couple of tenths, even between the exit of that corner and the timing line, which comes up just over the top of the hill. Here they come. Are we going to see any improvements then? Well, Joel Lask goes 4th ahead of Josh Martin. Nicky Taylor stays 2nd, though, and Kyle Felvis in 3rd. So a late improvement there for Lask, but the rest of them staying as they were. So qualifying done then here at Road America, although we'll get Elliot Doltaires across the line first. He stays in 6th place. We'll have all the reaction to that qualifying session in just a few minutes' time. Qualifying done here at Road America then for the AGON by AOC Mazda MX5 Cup, round number 3 of the championship, the first of several 40-minute pit stop races coming your way in just a few minutes' time. Well, qualifying is over. We're waiting for race 1 to start. That can mean only one thing. It's time to have a chat with Eric Axelson, because Eric, for a change, has decided to go and qualify on pole position for a race here on the VRRC. I've lost count now, quite frankly, of how many pole positions this is in a row for you, Eric, if you include the touring cars as well. The back end of last season, you were qualifying well every week, but it certainly is your 2nd pole position of this season so far, and it puts you in a good place now to try and extend that championship lead in race 1.
Well, yeah, it sure does. Yeah, I don't know. I just I like this car. I don't know. I'm just fast with it.
You are, and you're fast in the races as well. I mean, it's not fair to say that it's just qualifying that you excel at, but clearly there is something about your driving style that works well in a qualifying situation. Without giving too much away, is there something specific, do you think, about hot lapping and time trials that really suits you?
Well, that's how I started with sim racing, you know, hot lapping, and only like competing with myself. So I don't know. I always yeah, I thought hot lapping was really fun. So I guess that's why.
Well, that makes perfect sense then, because we also noticed you went out there sort of on your own. Some of the other drivers were trying to find a slipstream, trying to work with other drivers. You went out there. I don't think you ever had a slipstream throughout that whole session. Do you find that it's less distracting if you're just out there by yourself?
Well, the draft on this track is worth a lot, but it's also easy to make a mistake, and you would throw your quali away. So I don't want to take the risk.
Okay, that's interesting. We were chatting about that during the session, actually. It is easy to make a mistake when you're arriving at all the corners a bit quicker than you're used to. Of course, you won't have the luxury of being out there by yourself, certainly at the start of this race. It is a longer race, though, so how hard do you intend to fight for the race lead here? If someone wants to get past you in the early stages, are you aware of the fact, obviously, it's a longer race, you don't necessarily have to fight them too hard?
Well, I don't know what to answer. They will see.
Excellent. Okay, we're not going to get any more information out of you, clearly. We'll wait and chat to you, I'm sure, after the 40-minute race. Eric, best of luck.
Thank you, Andy.
Eric Axelson then on pole position. I've said that sometime before, I think, Jack. He is an absolute machine when it comes to qualifying. And really interesting to hear from him there that kind of comes from a background in hot lapping, in time trials. It's something it bores me to tears going out there on my own and just driving round and round in circles. But the best drivers that I come across in sim racing, Jack, are the ones who will spend hours by themselves just practicing.
Yeah, and it's a good skill to have if you can be that patient as well. I mean, quite often it comes hand in hand with learning how to set the car up, because you'll go out and you don't mind spending half an hour just bashing out laps, and all of a sudden you'll come in, you'll tweak one little component by 2 degrees, and you'll go out and bash it again for another half an hour, and you'll see that there's a half a tenth difference or something, and that's very satisfying to a lot of sim racers, shall we say. Again, I'm like you. I'm not that patient, and it bores me to tears as well, but it's clearly working for Eric out here tonight, and, he's going to have to, the rest of the field are going to have to be on the top of their game if they're going to have any chance of beating him in this race one.
Yeah, 100%. He's not going to be an easy man to beat, but they might just have a chance if they can gang up on him a bit and get ahead of him in the early stages. That's certainly a possibility. Of course, it's quite a long run down to that first corner, but once you're through turns 1, 2, and 3, you head out onto the next straight underneath the bridge, and there's another chance to jump in that slipstream and perhaps jump on the hybrid button. Only 50 uses of that hybrid, and it has to last them 40 minutes. Now, normally, the drivers are running out of that a minute or so before the end of a 20-minute sprint race, so they've got twice the amount of track time now, but no more uses of the hybrid, and a circuit where it's going to be oh so tempting to jump on that hybrid button right from the get-go. So we shall see what they decide to do. I'm sure many of them will try and get a bit of an extra boost on the run down towards that first corner. I can see plenty of you in the YouTube chat getting involved as well. Do keep your messages coming in. Adrian Felvis, as always, there supporting his son Kyle and the whole HFT team. Keep those messages coming in over the course of the next 40 minutes then. The race about to get underway with Eric Axelson on pole position, Nicky Taylor alongside him, a bit further back in the points after round 1 than Nicky would have liked to have been. Starting from the front row though, can he get some of those points back this evening? Let's find out. The lights go on, the lights go out now. We are away in racing here at Road America, and immediately Nicky Taylor and Axelson and Felvis all on the hybrid button as they make that long drag down towards the first corner. Axelson on the left, Taylor on the right. Look at the start for Axelson. That is insane. Eric Axelson's in a different postcode before they even get to the first corner, and it's not like he was the only one on the hybrid. I don't know how he managed that, but Eric Axelson, extra ballast or not, is a country mile clear, and now they will have to work together, surely, to try and bridge a 1.3 second gap, Jack. What is going on?
I've literally just had to put a post in the Discord asking, can you physically jumpstart in Assetto Corsa? Because that was absolutely mad, and it's not like the others got a bad start. Everybody else got the start that you would expect. Anyway, they're also going 3 wide, so we'll focus on that in a minute as Carl Felvis gets past Joel Last, and I think he's trying to go around the outside of his teammate is Nicky Taylor. Can't tell which is which, actually, to be honest, when they're in the same damn livery. But Joel Last back up the inside of Nicky Taylor. Carl Felvis is at the front of this with Josh Martin pushing Nicky Taylor off the road, as well as a couple of drivers trying to push the limits and warm those tyres up. Remember, these tyres will be cold. That is an issue we've spoken about in qualifying. It's an issue that these drivers have found. Hopefully, we won't see any big slip-ups, but it does create some really close racing in these early sort of stages of this 40-minute race. We've only had a minute and a half. We've already had two probably pretty big talking points. Axelson start and Nicky Taylor dropping down the order.
Yes, I don't quite know what to say, quite honestly. I mean, they're not helping themselves, this group, by tripping over each other in the way they are, but perhaps they've already sort of resigned themselves to the fact that second place is all they're going to be fighting for. Out of the kick we go. They're side by side. They're 3 wide further back. That's Martin Verhoeven and Taylor. Jens Verhoeven gaining 2 positions there, and without the use of the hybrid either. So Jens Verhoeven up the inside line then is going to try and sweep through in that yellow and black car, which he does. Runs a bit wide though. Here comes Taylor back alongside him. The next corner's a left-hander, and that will favour Verhoeven. Keep an eye to Josh Martin, the green machine, trying to buy into all of this as well. But as the race leaders come out of the final corner, Eric Axelson is going to have a lead of about 2.5 seconds at the end of just 1 lap of racing. Andy Carroll has fast-tracked back to the pit lane. That's why he has temporarily moved up into the lead, I believe, although confusingly, he's on the hybrid as well. Not quite sure what's going on there. There is Andy Carroll. Definitely not in the race lead. He is now starting to drop down to where he ought to be. Axelson then the leader by 2.2 seconds. Laskin second. Felvers third. Taylor fourth. Verhoeven fifth. And Josh Martin sixth after a crazy first lap.
It was very crazy indeed. And in fact, well, on our Discord chat, Rich Hayden has just decided to go silent. So I'm not sure whether he's actually looking at the start, but I'm sure all the traditionals are processed after the race. In fact, actually, I think it's the morning after here at VRRC, so there won't be any repercussions in the race. He won't have to take an extra pit stop. He won't have to do a 5-second stop and hold or anything like that if he did start. I think he just absolutely nailed it, Andy. I think he just had minimal wheel spin. He hit the hybrid at the bang amount right time, and he just got a fantastic drag. So yeah, all credit to Eric. He's done a brilliant job. So is Joel Lask getting into second place. Carl Felvis in third. Will probably be a little bit disappointed that he couldn't hold on to that second for the time being. But then this is a brilliant battle, isn't it? It's Nicky Taylor with just ahead of Jens Verhoeven. You've already mentioned he's done a brilliant job. It's absolutely stunning what he's done to get into 5th place. Josh Martin is trying to ruin the party somewhat. He goes up the inside. Verhoeven saw it coming, tries to get the cut back, but Martin, I think, has just about nailed his braking point. He's going to be on the inside for the long right-hander, and he's going to have that position for the time being. A lot of drivers have used quite a bit of hybrid. Joel Lask is one of them. He's already down to 10 hybrid uses for the next, well, 35 minutes, 36 minutes. Reese Bell is already down to single figures. He's got 9 uses for the next 35. I don't know if anybody's told him that we're actually running a double standard race here.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lask had no choice, though, because he was 2.2 seconds back of the lead, and by using the hybrid, he has been chipping away at that lead. It was down to about 1.5 seconds a moment or two ago, and if he can get within slipstreaming range, then perhaps he won't need to use the hybrid to then stay with Axelson. He's only used a couple more than Eric has, and he's getting away from Felvis in third. We've been continuing to monitor this battle for 5th position. Josh Martin ahead of Jens Verhoeven now, so Verhoeven having made that early progress, just slipping backwards slightly, but you can see the way that little gaggle have started to separate themselves now. It's 1.6 seconds between the top two. Oh, there is a spin for Simon Thorpe, I'm afraid. Simon Thorpe at Canada corner in the DK Power racing car, pointing the wrong way. But Joel Lask in second place with a new fastest lap of the race, closing in slightly on Axelson. 1.3 seconds further back to Felvis in third. Then Nicky Taylor another 1.5 seconds back in fourth. Half a second ahead of Josh Martin and Jens Verhoeven. But Lask is giving this his all. He is having to use a bit of hybrid to do it, but at the moment, he's a bit quicker than the race leader.
Yeah, I think if I was going into this, I'm a very simple racer, as you know, Andy. The whole trying to figure out when to use the hybrid system would just be one too many things to confuse me. So if I was going into this race and I was Eric Axelson, I would just be holding on to a hybrid, using it once every other lap, because I think with a roughly 2-minute lap, you should be doing about 40 laps. 20 laps in this 40-minute race. So you just use one every other lap. And we've already seen that he's got brilliant pace without it, because his qualifying time with electric on his own. He'd probably be pretty safe, but he'll be a little bit concerned that Joel Lask is running so hot on his heels. John Jones being overtaken there by Iyengar. It's interesting, Iyengar, this week. As I say that, I was about to say how much he's adapted to this car. He's not going to be able to show it off, though, because he makes contact with John Jones, who now makes contact with the wall. There we go. And that is a real shame for both of those drivers, just as I was about to start talking about Iyengar and how he's improved from round 1 to round 2.
Yes, indeed. That is a shame for both drivers. Actually, they're both running pretty well there. John Jones has looked a bit more at home in this MX5 so far, getting involved in a couple of incidents, but has looked a bit more pacey than we've seen from him in the past. And Alec Iyengar still learning the ropes here in his first season at the VRRC. Right then, Axelsen leading now by 1.4 seconds, so it's continuing to come down. And Joel Lask even has not actually used any hybrid on this lap, I don't think. So he is genuinely quicker than Eric right now, and pulling 1.9 seconds clear of Feldes in third position. We're following Jens Verhoeven, just hanging on in that slipstream. But it does seem that if you have a pace advantage over the car behind you, you can break away from them, which is perhaps just a result of these cars having that bit more power, well, quite a chunk more power actually than the standard MX5 would have. I think that maybe negates the power of the slipstream slightly, and it makes the cars that bit harder to drive. So those who are naturally better at handling that extra power do seem to be able to escape the cars behind. Axelsen, though, certainly not escaping last. I reckon Joel is almost within slipstreaming range of the race leader now, and we're not even quite 8 minutes into this race, so I'm not giving this win to Axelsen just yet.
No, Joel Lask actually got purple Sector 2 and Sector 3. Now, you would argue Sector 2 and Sector 3 down into Canada Corner. I'm not sure where the sector cuts off, but it's around that sort of area of the lap. Really strong slipstreaming around that time. So I think Joel does have a little bit of a waft, shall we say, from the car in front, and which is only going to sort of help him because there's only 2 hybrid uses difference between Axelsen and Lask. Like you said, Lask has been quick without it. Maybe he's just gotten into a rhythm. Maybe he's learnt a thing or two from the driver ahead. He's pulled away from Kyle Feldes rather significantly, and that is significant because Kyle took a race victory last week at Laguna Seca. Might be holding on to his tyres a little bit longer. I'm not entirely sure. We've had an update. Apparently everybody is on soft, as we can see on the left-hand side. It goes a bit pixelated for me. So the likelihood is, Andy, at the moment, we're going to be looking like we're going to go soft on the pit, so you were probably right.
There's a first time for everything. There are 3 drivers on the mediums at the back. Simon Thorpe, Paul Laramie and Kenny Press, but they're at the back, so clearly the soft tyres is the way to go. Certainly those at the front of the field all running on the softs, and if they can get anywhere near half race distance before feeling the need to pit, then yeah, surely they'll go for the softs again in the second half of the race. But the timing of that pit stop could still be quite interesting, especially since that slipstream isn't having quite the effect we thought it would. Right, Sam Zero, I'm sure I heard somewhere earlier on today that Sam wasn't racing with us tonight, but that he is racing with us, and he's racing inside the top 10. He's got Alec Iyengar right in front of him, 2 new drivers to the VRRC. Nice to see them both inside the top 10. A slightly depleted grid for this week. As I said, we're hoping to regain some of our drivers that we've lost this week for future rounds, but nonetheless, impressive to have these 2 inside the top 10, especially Iyengar. Of course, he's not had a trouble-free race so far.
Yeah, and the other 2 drivers that we haven't mentioned who aren't here this week, obviously one of them was supposed to be Sam Zero. He has turned up, which is great. Ethan Hill and Nathan Blank apparently will be with us next week, but unfortunately they couldn't be in attendance tonight. And one other bit of business, which I noticed as the lights went out, there was a gap on the grid. It was Elliot Dalton Ayres, who unfortunately, for some reason, was transported back to the pit lane and has not come out. So, yeah, a little bit of a depleted grid. We're looking into all the incidents and everything, obviously, as we go. But a bit of a shame for Elliot. He won't be able to run in this race for some reason.
That is significant because, of course, he was running 3rd in the championship, and just because we have the 1 race here tonight as opposed to 2 on most nights, I think the way they do it is they double the point system, don't they? So it's worth the same amount of points this race as a double header normally would be. So in other words, he stands to lose just as many points as he would do if he missed 2 races, for example, next week at Circuit of the Americas. So yeah, shame that for Elliot Dalton Ayres, who was a podium finisher a week ago. Up through the middle sector then comes this battle for 4th, and it is now a battle for 4th. Josh Martin has closed in on Nicky Taylor, and Josh Martin looking rapid here. He was there or thereabouts a week ago, wasn't he? Had a couple of 5th place finishes, but I don't think we've yet seen the best of Josh Martin in this MX5. He's running in that 5th place again now, but looks quicker than Nicky Taylor, and Nicky is within a couple of seconds of Kyle Felvers up the road as well, so there could yet be a podium here for Josh if he gets on with this move on Taylor.
Yeah, I think Josh Martin, he did very well in the touring cars towards the end of the season as well, didn't he? So I get the impression that maybe, unlike Kyle Felvers, who was very happy to see the rear-wheel drive sports cars of MX5s back on the grid, maybe Josh was actually quite enjoying the front-wheel drive nature of the touring cars, and maybe jumping into these rear wheels hasn't quite clicked with him yet, but we know how dangerous he is, and we know that he's got a strong support network in the YouTube chat as well, or he has done previous seasons. So fingers crossed they're cheering him on, and I'm sure he'll crack the code eventually. He seems to be getting somewhere here tonight, doesn't he? Because as you said, he's caught up to the likes of Nicky Taylor, and Kyle Felvers isn't going that much quicker. In fact, he's about 10th down on Nicky Taylor and about the same as Josh Martin on that previous lap. But on this lap particularly, Josh has gone green sector 1 and 2. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes green in sector 3 as well, because he's got that nice, healthy slipstream on the back of Nicky's car. Not quick enough or close enough to be able to make any kind of moves just yet, but he has got 11 uses of the hybrid left. While you're in the slipstream, maybe you just don't need to use them as much, unlike Eric Axelsen, who seems to be churning through them all of a sudden.
He is, and in doing so is maintaining the gap now to last at around 1.3, 1.4 seconds, but as you say, at a price. We're not even halfway through yet, and he is ticking towards halfway through his hybrid allocation. Speaking of which, Kyle Felvers jumping on it as he heads out of turn number 3 and all the way down the back straight towards turn number 5. The Americans do like to invent corners that clearly don't exist. Apparently there's a corner somewhere between the first two 90-degree right-handers and another one somewhere on the run down towards turn 5. Don't ask me. In the pit lane is Andy Carroll. This appears to be a scheduled pit stop. This is a little bit early, though. Out he goes with only, well, less than 13 minutes in. What's he changed onto? He's changed onto the mediums. That's interesting. Now, we've seen Andy pulling some interesting tyre strategies in the past, haven't we? And I wonder if he's going to try something different here. Not the way I would have chosen to do it, but Andy must have his reasons.
Yes, well, it's a bit of an experiment, a bit of a guinea pig, I would say. We can watch it, we can learn from it. It might be a complete masterstroke, it might be a disaster class. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? But Andy clearly thinking that it's the preferred strategy. I'm sure he's done plenty of practice on both the softs and the mediums, and probably the hards briefly before realising that the race isn't long enough to take advantage of the hard tyre. But yeah, it is an interesting one. We have got 3 drivers on the mediums, like you were mentioning before, Andy, but all 3 of them are right at the back of the grid. Well, now we have 4, and all 4 of them are right at the back now. So yeah, it's going to be wait and see until that one pulls off. Speaking of pulling it off, can Josh Martin pull off this move into Canada Corner? He doesn't even look up the inside. He's just piling an awful lot of pressure on Nicky Taylor, but clearly he doesn't fancy it. Is he coming into the pit lane? We'll have to wait and see, but that's the only real reason why I can think he wants to sit behind Nicky for the time being.
Yeah, I mean, the only other reason would be if he thought that he and Nicky could work together to catch Kyle Felvers, but that ship appears to have sailed because Kyle's nearly 3 seconds up the road from them now, and they're not gaining. So, yeah, neither driver heading for the pit lane. However, even if Josh does feel that he's quicker than Nicky, maybe felt that that was going to be a high-risk move, or it was a move that was going to end up costing them lots of time. Part of the trick of MX5 racing is you want to overtake somebody with the smallest possible delay, and that means not going side by side through a sequence of corners. You ideally want to draft past them down the straight, get to the inside, and just command that corner so they can't retaliate on the exit. So Josh Martin perhaps just biding his time, knowing it's a longer race, and at the moment he's sat in the slipstream saving hybrid. He's got more hybrid left than anybody else inside the top half dozen or so, and that's because he's saving it in that slipstream of Nicky Taylor ahead. Again, chooses not to use it heading down the straight towards the braking zone at turn number 5. Now, this is a good overtaking opportunity, but he's not really closing in that quickly, is he? It comes down to 3 tenths, then about 2.5 tenths as he hits the brakes just about now. And yeah, not close enough. They're both very evenly matched under braking. The car's wobbling around a bit. Of course, fully adjustable brake bias on these cars as well. And it looks like a few of them have wound that brake bias towards the back because there's a lot of squirming going on from the rear of the car into some of these braking zones. And that, again, perhaps is hampering Josh's ability to lunge up the inside.
Yeah, maybe if he comes into the pits, I don't know if there's an ability to change it. I've been told after last week I said that you can change the brake bias whilst you're in the car. I've been told that was incorrect. You can't change it whilst in the car, unfortunately, so I got that one slightly wrong. But I'm not going to say you can do it in the pit lane because, truthfully, I don't know. So I'm waiting to see if Lewis or Rich will tell me in the YouTube chat. Maybe that's something that they can adjust. As I said, they go through the rest of the session. But as the grip changes on the car, and the circuit develops and all these sort of things, you do want to change things ever so slightly. Maybe it'll be slipperier at the start, so you want to change the brake bias to be a little bit more towards the front or the rear, and it might grip up and you want to go the other way sort of thing. So it's quite a lot to think about when you're actually driving these cars, and all of a sudden you can start tinkering with setups and playing around with things whilst you're actually sort of racing or going into the pit lane. So we'll wait and see whether anybody actually has a little bit of a tinker and goes on a split strategy like Andy Carroll has. Got to try and keep an eye on his lap times. Well, at the moment, he's running in a 20. On his last lap, it was a 2:57 because he hasn't actually come around to complete the lap yet. He will do in a couple of seconds' time, so we'll keep an eye on that one. But yeah, a lot of drivers absolutely ruining their hybrid, Andy, and Josh Martin's not one of them. So I think you're absolutely right. I think he is sat there waiting and saving and playing the long game.
I think so, yes. The leaders are both down into single figures. Looks like Felvis and Taylor are as well. Josh Martin in a good position as far as the contenders near the front are concerned for saving slipstream. We're riding on board here with Paul Laramie, 13th position for him. That's Simon Thorpe ahead. We saw Simon having that spin right here, actually, at Canada corner a few laps ago. On board with Laramie, out wide goes Thorpe. He always has another spin, and then Laramie jinks to the right to avoid him and costs himself some momentum too. Through the left-hander he goes. Go on, throw it up the inside. Oh no, didn't quite have the commitment there to go right round the top of the hill and jink to the inside at the last corner. Laramie defends, and that's now going to compromise his run off the corner, surely. Neither of them get off the final turn very tidily, though, and so it all now boils down to the slipstream. They both jump onto the hybrid as they make their way over the hill and across the timing line again, where surely now Laramie will pull to the right-hand side to try and pass. Yes, he does. He'll have the inside line now for turn number 1, but they're both arriving there quite quickly, having both used the hybrid over the top of the hill. Last of the late breakers. Laramie gets to the apex first and appears to get the car stopped nicely. A good move that from Laramie to move up into 12th place.
Yeah, there was quite a few opportunities, wasn't there? But with himself and Simon Thorpe getting a little bit loose in amongst apexes and exits, and well, fingers crossed, really, Andy, that they're having a lot of fun, because it does look like good fun out there, doesn't it? They may not be catching up to the likes of Sam Zero. They're 20 seconds back, actually. But of course, a lot of the other drivers do have to make another pit stop. But they look like they've got a big smile on their face, I would say, just in the way they're driving. You would hope so, anyway. They're probably a fixture of concentration in real life. But it looks like they're enjoying themselves, which is the main reason why we come sim racing.
Indeed, and we're enjoying watching them as Simon Thorpe goes back up the inside and snatches that 12th place back again. You can have no more on the sim, I don't think, than racing an MX5. It's just such a user-friendly car, even with the extra power and the hybrid and all the things you have to think about here on the VRRC's version of MX5 racing. It's still a lot of fun, and these two may not be fighting for podium places, but they are fighting for 12th place. And poor old Kenny Press is a long way behind them. I'm not quite sure what happened to Kenny. He's 26 seconds further back, so he probably is the only driver in the race not having a particularly good time, because he's really got no one to play with. But everyone else involved in a fight of some description, even if it's just trying to catch or not be caught by the cars around them. Very wide line there for Thorpe through the carousel, but Paul Laramie sensibly decides not to get up the inside into the King, and Thorpe, interestingly there, realised he'd made a mistake and then immediately hit that hybrid button to try and get away from Laramie. He's down to, I think that's 4 now, hybrid uses left for Thorpe. So using the hybrid to get out of trouble, but he will very shortly run out of that, because we are, Jack, still not quite halfway through the race. What we haven't seen yet, though, and Lewis Edwards, our director, has just brought up the point I was about to make, we haven't really seen any pit stops from the front runners, although as I say that, John Jones and Sam Zero do dive into the pit lane now, but it looks like these soft tyres are lasting long enough for that to be the only compound they have to use.
Yeah, no, when you, that's probably a pre-planned pit stop. They just think, you know what, when we get to half distance, we're just going to pit whatever's happening. That's exactly what I would do as a simplistic racing driver and race strategist. But it's not a bad strategy. It means you get a pretty good life out of the soft, and you put some brand new ones on. You know how they're going to react and everything. But they're going to come out just as Paul Laramie and Simon Thorpe are battling into turn 1. Oh, Paul Laramie clambering all over the apex. No, and he's going to end his race a little bit early, unfortunately, with Simon Thorpe there. And, well, he went to meet and greet the barriers, didn't he, unfortunately, on the inside of turn 1. And the most painful thing, Andy, is that exact sort of point we were making in qualifying. It is a long lap to get round back into the pits if he does have to make any changes.
And an even long lap if you have damage, yeah, for sure. I've crashed at that corner many a time, Jack. I've never quite crashed there in that way. That was a very interesting way of getting into the barriers by somehow losing it going into the corner and cutting across the inside grass. But Paul Laramie making friends with the tyre wall there, and certainly not the first person to do so. Right, Josh Martin then, running in 5th position, still in the wheel tracks of Nicky Taylor. They have been a bit quicker than Kyle Felvers. I've been watching this gap coming down over the last few laps, but now that all sort of becomes irrelevant because 1st, 2nd, 3rd and 4th pit, and Josh Martin decides not to. That looked like a last-minute decision to stay out. Do the opposite of those ahead. If you do exactly the same strategy as those you're racing against, you ain't going to beat them. So Josh Martin trying something different, jumps on the hybrid, gets the lead of the race, but still owes us a pit stop with Axelsen, Lask, Felvers, Taylor and Verhoeven all diving for the pit lane.
Does he spam the hybrid now? Does he try and get that in lap as quick as humanly possible? And maybe he's got, say, 3 uses of the hybrid before he just is on equal footing with the drivers that he was around. That's exactly what I would do, but that isn't necessarily the thing that is best to do. John Jones going side by side with Simon Thorpe. So Simon Thorpe may have lost a play friend with Paul Laramie, but he's found another friend out there on the circuit in the form of John Jones, who obviously had a little bit of a coming together, unfortunately, with Iyengar a little while ago. Iyengar is actually up to 3rd place because he hasn't taken the pit stop yet, actually. So he's probably enjoying himself for the time being before he comes back into the pit lane, as Joel Lask is just behind and exiting. Eric Axelsen, the provisional race leader, is now in 4th place behind Iyengar, Reese Bell, and that man Josh Martin.
Oh, this is significant because this gap was over a second before they pitted. A much better pit stop there for Lask, and he's right on the tail now of Axelsen. He's on the hybrid. Axelsen's used his a bit earlier, and this could be Lask's one and only opportunity to get into the net race lead. Jinx to the outside, then down to the inside. Late on the brakes. Can he stop the car? Yes, he can. And Joel Lask moves ahead of Eric Axelsen. No, he doesn't. Axelsen hangs tough around the outside. The momentum on the outside line keeps him ahead, and they're both sort of getting bottled in here behind Alec Iyengar, who, remember, had not pitted to the inside there. Oh, goes Axelsen. That delays him, and that almost gives Lask the opportunity. It does give him the opportunity. Right round the outside he goes. Alec Iyengar is defending from these two, now gets out of the way, but not before he has cost Axelsen a position. But then Lask goes wide. He's just got the position and makes a big mistake and brings Axelsen right back alongside again.
Yeah, and there's contact through the right. It's going to keep going. Axelsen holds on to it, and I think, to be fair, Joel Lask, who may have caused the problem in the first place, gave him that little nudge on the front end to actually straighten the car back up. Thank God this battle isn't over and done with, because that would be a disastrous way to see Eric Axelsen written out of this race. But Joel Lask does get the race lead. Well, provisional race lead, sorry, I should say, shouldn't I? A little bit cheeky. The ethics may be sort of being... shall we say, grayed out on that particular move, Andy, because there was a lot to be said about Iyengar's car positioning, although Iyengar's not a back marker. He's not getting blue flag, didn't need to move out the way. He's in that track position. He wants to hold track position, even if he's on a different strategy. And then obviously the move by Lask was maybe a touch questionable.
Well, yes, I would like to see another angle of that, because it was hard to tell from there whether Axelsen turned into him or whether he drifted out into Eric. Iyengar pits now. Josh Martin, by the way, has just pitted as well. Let's see where he comes out. He's probably not going to be in touch with these two, but he might well be able to leapfrog ahead of Nicky Taylor. So back through go Lask and Axelsen into 2nd and 3rd places, respectively, now, as we wait for Reese Bell to pit. Here comes Josh Martin out of the pit lane, and Nicky Taylor arrives at speed, and I think will sweep back ahead of him. Yes, he will, and that's an increased margin there. So a bit of an undercut maybe from Nicky Taylor pitting that lap earlier. Josh Martin, interestingly, only used 1 hybrid on his in-lap. He's only down to 10, so he has got double the hybrid available of the cars directly ahead of him, but he's a bit further back now than he was. Almost 2 seconds the distance between he and Taylor as he starts to try and get up to speed.
Yeah, well, as I said, for Josh Martin, I would have probably used about 3 uses of the hybrid just in that in-lap. And around here, there is lots of opportunity to use that hybrid without having to sort of ruin it by going through a corner. There's lots of flat-out sections here. Going into the turn that we've just seen, we could go into Canada Corner, obviously over the start-finish line. He could have probably gained about half a second or even a second, and that, instead of putting him out behind Nicky Taylor, would have put him out behind Kyle Felvers, and then he could have done the slipstream battle then for 3rd place instead of 4th. So, yeah, interesting that Josh didn't do that, but you never know. He might have an almighty plan up his sleeve.
Well, let's remember that Josh Martin, what have we seen from him time and time again in the past? He is very, very good at the end of a race. He always seems to come strong in the final third of a race. So perhaps he's playing the long game. Of course, the other thing is he won't necessarily know that he's got more hybrid available than those around him, because unless you have a spotter or somebody specifically monitoring that information and relaying it back to you as a driver, you won't necessarily know what the rest of them are doing. Simon Thorpe, well, I'm not quite sure what he's doing, to be honest. He's stuck in the grass and going nowhere. He's had a spin somewhere on track. I'm not entirely sure where that was. Possibly on the exit of Canada corner. Anyway, he's fast-tracked back to the pit lane, and that sadly means that his race will be done. So he joins, on the looks of it, Paul Laramie, as the race is 2 non-finishers. But, yeah, very interesting situation we've got here. So worth mentioning that Joel Lask is not the race leader. The race lead belongs to Reece Bell. He has yet to stop and will, of course, lose that lead. In fact, he does now dive for the pit lane and will drop down the order. So Joel Lask now gets the opportunity to move into the lead of the race ahead of Eric Axelsen by 0.7 of a second. But Axelsen closing with a slipstream and the hybrid. This race is not over yet.
No, and to be honest, I think this is the best opportunity for Eric Axelsen to secure the fastest lap of the race as well, because at the moment that's dominated by Joel Lask by 0.5 second on Eric Axelsen. And as we know, points are getting doubled this round. I'm going to wait for confirmation to see if the fastest lap points get doubled, because they should, because you can get a fastest lap for race 1 and a fastest lap for race 2. So that's 6 points in total over the evening. You should be able to get 6 points just for one single fastest lap in this endurance race. And so that could be massive in terms of championship points. Joel Lask currently holds it. Eric Axelsen wants it. And now he's got the slipstream. He's got a hybrid use as well. He's got every opportunity of potentially taking that away from Lask if he can get the move done cleanly at the same time.
Is a big if, though, because he's already now starting to lose time, because Lask was defending there into turn number 5 and has a big wobble on the exit, so Axelsen gets his chance immediately to go up the inside into the left-hander at turn 6, and Lask will have to give that up there. There was no way that he was going to hang around the outside. Axelsen then back to the front, but will he be able to get away? I don't think he will be able to, because we saw earlier on that he was every bit as quick as, Lask that is, was every bit as quick as Axelsen, even when he wasn't necessarily in the slipstream of the race leader. Now that he is in the slipstream, I think he's going to be a constant thorn in the side of the Swedish assassin here. The front of the field, 12 minutes to go. Axelsen leads, then Lask in second, everyone having now made their mandatory pit stop. Kyle Felvis in third, fourth Nicky Taylor, and fifth position Josh Martin. Josh Martin, by the way, has already taken over a second out of Nicky Taylor, because he's starting now to use some of those spare hybrids. He could yet get back onto his tail before the end of the race. Verhoeven is 6th, Carroll 7th, Reece Bell rejoins the circuit in 8th, ahead of Sam Zero and Alok Iyengar, and here comes Joel Lask up the inside.
Yeah, he was using his hybrid. He had double the amount that Axelsen did. He's used one of them to good measure, and he goes ahead of Eric Axelsen for the time being. I'll tell you what, Andy, I love Joel Lask, don't get me wrong, but I didn't see this happening, especially not after qualifying. Axelsen just seemed to have a massive amount of pace. It looked like Joel Lask was only really catching up because of the amount of hybrid that he used early on in the race to get up past a few people like Carl Felvis and Nicky Taylor and Josh Martin. But all of a sudden now, you wouldn't be as surprised at all if Joel Lask takes the top step away from Axelsen, would you? He's really driven absolutely superbly, as has Axelsen, to be fair. But these two drivers have really put on a show here today, and we've still got 11 minutes for them to settle it between themselves. Axelsen doesn't look for the move up in the inside of turn 1. Maybe he suspects that the Lask has got a few more hybrids up his sleeve, so he's going to have to be a little bit more careful this time. Which is true. It's 2 left for Axelsen, 4 for Lask, so he may well be thinking about that. I think the other thing he was thinking about there was the fact that Joel Lask was 6/10 slower than Kyle Felvis on the previous lap. Their battling was delaying them massively, and Eric realises that if he's not going to be able to escape at the front, there's perhaps not much point in forcing the issue right now. The last thing he wants Lask to be doing is defending into the corners. That slows them both down and allows maybe Kyle Felvis to become a factor in this race as well. That's not going to help though. Out wide over the grass goes Eric Axelsen, but again, he didn't try and throw it up the inside there. Lask didn't have to go overly defensive into turn number 5, and so their lap speed is improving slightly now.
now. Eric Axelsen then, the mind games now, the tactics of Mazda MX5 racing start to really come to the fore. Is he going to sit there and wait until the last lap? We've still got 10 minutes to go. That's still another 4 or 5 laps of racing remaining. Ample opportunity for him to make the move. And it doesn't matter, Jack, how many times you lead across the line. You just have to lead that final lap. And very often around circuits like this, certainly, the race lead is not necessarily the place you want to be starting the final lap.
Yeah, you don't get a point or anything like that for leading a lap, so it's not like you want to be able to start the lap in the lead and then end the lap in the lead. It really doesn't matter. You do just want that the last 5 yards to be your car going across the line in first, don't you? And you're absolutely right. Eric Axelsen looking at the inside, but it's not happening for the time being. We've got loads of people commenting on the YouTube chat as well. Brilliant to have you guys in. Hopefully you're enjoying it. Please do like and subscribe and all those sort of things, because it's a genuine honour to be your host for the evening. Fingers crossed you're enjoying everything VRRC has to bring.
It certainly, yes, and I'm particularly enjoying this race. It goes to show that it may be a longer race with pit stops, but we still get arguably closer racing than we had at any point a week ago at Laguna Seca. Just because it's a long race doesn't mean that the field spreads out, doesn't mean that the racing action is any less intense, because this is how close it is for the race lead. Joel Lask leading, Eric Axelsen again giving him the bumper across the start-finish line, and that time around, Kyle Felvers not quite as fast as them, so it's working, this plan for Axelsen. It's keeping this at just a two-way fight for the lead, as opposed to allowing Felvers into the mix. And Felvers is somebody, so too is Joel Lask really, but Felvers certainly at this stage someone that Axelsen will have his eye on from the championship perspective, because Felvers is second in the points coming into tonight. I know we've only had 1 week of racing, but Axelsen knows that Kyle is good in rear-wheel drive sports cars, and he'll be definitely wanting to keep him out of that lead fight. Reece Bell here at the inside of Andy Carroll. Remember, Carroll is on medium tyres, quite old medium tyres now as well. He's done about 20 minutes on those tyres, and that perhaps is starting to show, because on relatively fresh tyres, remember Reece Bell was the last driver to make a pit stop. He is eating into the time that Andy Carroll had over him. He's on his tail now, and I don't think it'll be long before the Zebra liveried car makes its move.
Yeah, well, actually, it's something we didn't really talk about as everybody came out the pits, but yeah, everybody came out on the softs, didn't they? The majority of people, anyway. Andy Carroll was not one of those drivers, but I don't think the experiment has particularly worked out for him, has it? As drivers are now on the softs for the last 7.5 minutes, I can't see them dropping off, because they didn't for the first 25 minutes of this particular race. So the mediums aren't really going to come in strong, I don't believe, unfortunately, for Andy Carroll. But I do admire the fact that he gave it a good go, and it was a little bit of a guinea pig situation for him, to be fair. So yeah, well done to Andy for trying something slightly different. Hasn't quite worked out. Right, Josh Martin, he's not trying anything different, is he? He's just hunkered up behind Nicky Taylor, enjoying himself. Oh, actually, we could be starting to see a bit of an attempt to actually get past Josh for Josh Martin. For the first time, and we've seen he's actually attacking Nicky Taylor through Canada corner on the inside. Nicky Taylor holding that momentum, though, around the outside, and holds on, as a consequence, to 4th place.
He does. Through the left-hander they head then. Nicky Taylor having been caught by Josh Martin for the second time in this race now, having once again to try and defend from him. Off in the distance you can see the leaders absolutely together. Kyle Felvers feeling a bit left out now. He's not catching the leaders, and Nicky Taylor and Josh Martin are not catching him particularly either. So, well, let's see actually, a 2 minute 20.8. Yeah, no, they're matching him really. So Felvers likely to stay lonely until the end, I think. There goes Axelsen behind Joel Lask. And still the two of them stay together. Now, just over 6 minutes to go. Jack, your maths is probably better than mine, but I reckon that's 3 laps left. Yeah, I think we'll just about squeeze 3 more in here, won't we? So when does Axelsen make his move? That's the question.
I'm going to just agree and nod and then pretend like it's your fault when it's wrong.
Oh, you don't want to do that.
Well, that way I can just blame you when we're inevitably wrong. But yes, no, it's I think, to be honest, if I was Axelsen, Joel Lask is defending heavily. I would just keep making him defend, just trying to stay where he needs to be. On the face of it, Axelsen's at a disadvantage. He hasn't got the track position, and he hasn't got the hybrid uses either. Joel Lask, since he's got into the race lead, hasn't touched the hybrid once. He's not being worried. Even if Axelsen looks quicker than him going into a corner, he's not using it to defend. He's not doing anything. So Lask, I think, is holding on to those hybrid uses just in case Axelsen gets past, so he can then attack for the race lead again. He's not worried about defending, it seems. He wants to be aggressive with those 4 hybrid uses. And keep in mind, like we mentioned, he won't know how many Axelson has under his bonnet either. But if Axelson was deploying them, he would be well past him on any of these straights. So Lask knows that he's a bit nervous. He's a bit tentative to use them. Probably means he hasn't got many left.
Exactly, and he also knows that Axelson hasn't passed him yet, so he doesn't have to use it. What's the point in using it if Axelson's just going to sit behind him anyway? So might as well wait for the final lap, and that is why my money is still on Joel Lask here. I think if neither of them use the hybrid again until the final lap, then Joel clearly is at an advantage. Right, this is a bold move. Josh Martin to the outside of Nicky Taylor into Canada corner. That is a really bold move, and it works. Fantastic driving from Josh Martin. What did I tell you? He comes on strong in the final part of the race, and he has done so again, finally cracking the defences of Nicky Taylor to get into 4th position. So, out of the last corner he goes. Now, what does Nicky do? Does Nicky work with him to try and catch Kyle Felvers, who is Nicky's teammate, remember? Or does he go on the attack? Well, Josh Martin clearly thinks he'll go on the attack because he's moving to the right there to try and break the toe. Also used some hybrid, I think, there, did Josh. And he's already got away from Nicky to the tune of a second or so, I reckon that is. As they, just under 9/10 of a second as they head for turn 1. I think Josh could get a podium here. He's 1.5 behind Felvers. He's got more hybrids than Kyle and looks the quicker of the two. He might just have time to get there.
He might have set his car up to be able to come in and towards the end of the race as well. You can do that. Don't ask me how. That's not the way to do it, though, because his rear end almost switches round on him. Now, that is going to be a bit of a problem for him. He's having to use a hybrid just to stay ahead of Nicky Taylor here. I think he panicked a bit there, Andy, unless he switched it on as he was giving it a boot full of power. I didn't quite see whether the two lined up. It looked to me like he panicked a little bit there and wanted to make sure his hard work to get into 4th place didn't go to waste.
Yes, 10 out of 10 for style there. Very much enjoyed that. Won't have done his tyres much good, but with 3 minutes to go, I suppose he's not that worried about that. Now, Eric Axelson might be starting to worry because he's nearly a second behind Joel Lask. Now, that's not out of slipstreaming range, far from it, but that is the biggest that gap has been with Lask in front all race long. Axelson, of course, was 2.2 seconds clear at the end of 1 lap, but since then we've not seen this sort of a gap between them. So Joel Lask maybe just trying to pull the pin out in front. Certainly Josh Martin is trying to do that, but in the middle part of the lap, Nicky Taylor actually starting to reel him in slightly, which tells me that Nicky is better through some of the more technical parts of the circuit. And weirdly, Josh Martin, despite being the lead car, able to gap him slightly down the faster sections, out towards the kink they go. And Nicky Taylor running the grass there as he turns into the quick right-hand corner. They're about to start their final lap of the race then, and I don't know if Axelson's got an answer for Lask here. 8.5 tenths back, just over a lap to go, and less hybrid than the man that he's chasing, albeit only by 1 now. Joel Lask has used his hybrid once more since last we saw them, but I'm fancying Lask for this first victory of the season.
Yeah, well, he's used the hybrid once. However, he has gained 0.6 of a second on that lap, hasn't he? And now Axelson is starting to use his to try and get that, put that pressure back on. We can see them in the distance, and in fact, we can see them now going over the start-finish line. Axelson's used it going up the hill. He doesn't have it anymore, so he's not going to be catching too much into turn 1. He's going to be one of the opportunities done and dusted. This will be the final lap of the race. The lap is 2 minutes and 20. We've only got 1 minute and 40. Axelson needs to do everything he can, but I think you're right. Joel Lask, without any big screw-ups, shall we say, he should be in prime position to use his hybrid in a defensive manner and to be able to just hold on to this lead and do nothing silly.
Yes, although now you've said that, the gap comes down to less than it's been for a while. Back onto the hybrid goes Lask, but Axelson has no hybrid left. Now, Joel won't necessarily know about that. He has 2 more uses of it, but look at the way, that's interesting. Lask used the hybrid there down towards the left-hander at turn 5, and Axelson still maintains. So the lead car does not really have an advantage from the hybrid. That slipstream is powerful enough to keep Axelson in the race. Under the bridge they go, through the difficult off-camber left-hander at turn number 6, half a lap to go, and a couple of realistic overtaking opportunities remaining. I would imagine we'll see another push of the hybrid from Lask next, probably as they head out of the kink down towards Canada corner, and then he'll maybe save some for the run to the line. So it's still going to be difficult for Axelson to get through, but Eric is going to throw everything out this. Through the right-hander at the carousel they go. This never-ending right-hander. Crucial that you get off the corner well, though, because you've got to get this run down towards the kink, which is flat out, I'd imagine, in these cars. And Axelson's had a good run. Lask is on the hybrid early, actually, choosing to use it before they get to that kink, and that could leave him vulnerable down the next stretch towards Canada corner, where Axelson Axelsen might just be able to get the run. Out over the curb he goes. He's in the slipstream. 0.4 of a second is the starting point. The gap is not really coming down. Now it starts to, but I don't think Eric's going to be in striking range. Into the braking zone. No, he's not. Last just about hanging on. Joel Last wasn't even in the top 5 in either of the races last week, but now Eric Axelsen looks as though he might be running out of opportunities through the left-hander into the final turn. Remember, the leader has one extra bit of hybrid to use as well, and it looks like Joel Lask, as I said, didn't trouble the top 5 runners a week ago, but now it looks as though he's going to get a first victory of the season. Joel Lask comes over the hill, he sees the checkered flag, and he will win round number 3 of the AGON by AOC Mazda MX5 Cup here on the VRRC. Victory for Lask, second for Axelsen, and a big old gap back to Kyle Felvis, who has not quite been caught by Josh Martin at the flag. Felvis gets 3rd, Martin 4th, Taylor 5th, Jens Verhoeven will come back. Jens Verhoeven's in the wall, but will eventually come across the line in 6th, ahead of Respel a long way back in 7th. Here comes Respel through the final couple of corners, but a beautifully judged victory there by Joel Lask. He managed to hang on when, honestly, not many of us at the start of the race would have predicted he could.
No, I'll be straight honest. I didn't expect Joel Last to win this race at all. After qualifying and after practice, I thoroughly assumed that Eric would be taking that crown, but I'm absolutely loving the fact that Joel is proving us wrong. He's throwing his hat into the ring for the championship. He was in 7th place in the championship going into tonight. Yet another reason why potentially the odds weren't with him, but he's certainly done well here today, and fingers crossed that can continue. We're just looking at Alok Iyengar. Now, Alok did have a spin right at the beginning of the race, which is a big shame, but he has managed to get himself into the top 10, and he's done so with not using any hybrid whatsoever. Neither's Kenny Press, who's just overtaken Sam Zero going into the final corner. Will he hold that? Well, if Kenny Press found the button for the hybrid on his steering wheel, he could be able to overtake him, but he hasn't found it yet. So I think somebody needs to teach both of those drivers potentially how to map that hybrid system onto their wheel. But it looks like the back of the grid had just as much of an entertaining race as we had at the front.
Absolutely, 40 minutes, but absolutely flew by that race did, and for Joel Lask, it ends in victory. He'll be very, very pleased with that. So Lask with the victory then, 2nd for Axelsen, 3rd for Kyle Felvis, then 4th for Josh Martin, Nicky Taylor 5th, Jens Verhoeven 6th, Respel 7th, Andy Carroll 8th, Alok Iyengar inside the top 10 in 9th position ahead of Kenny Press with Sam Zero, John Jones next in line. When I said that Kenny Press was miles off the back of the pack about half an hour ago now, I think that possibly was because he'd pitted, because he did end up picking up some places there towards the end of the race. So, exciting stuff then. Not a victory for Eric Axelsen, as many people were predicting. Instead, it is Joel Lask who manages to get himself the race win, and Joel, I believe, we can have a chat with now. And Joel joins us in the commentary box. Joel, congratulations. Fantastic race win. You probably heard the back end of our discussion there. I don't think many people would have predicted that anybody could beat Eric in the race, given his qualifying and that demon start that he had. How confident were you, though, you had an answer for him today?
I wasn't, to be fair. That was a tough gig. I see him pull away at the start, and then it was just a battle to get up there. I was using the deployment to push me through the pack a little bit so I could keep up with him going into the first stop. So, yeah, that was a tough one. That was not easy.
There were a couple of really important phases, well, 3 really important phases of that race. The first one was the initial stint where, like you say, you managed to drag that gap down. He was about 2.2 seconds ahead at one point. Then you managed to catch him. Then you had a quicker pit stop as well. And then, of course, the end bit where you were defending the lead. But let's talk about that pit stop, because where do you think you found that time? You gained the best part of a second, I think, just in the stop alone.
Yeah, I practiced the pit stops earlier, to be fair. I managed to mess it up a little bit and bang it into reverse in the practice stop. So I came in nice and easy, stopped on the dot, and then was straight on the clutch waiting so I could boot it out of the pits as soon as it finished. So, yeah, it was nice to see me come right up against him out of the pits. So it was nice to make some time up.
And then that battle at the end, we thoroughly enjoyed watching that. You got the lead. He attacked you for a couple of laps, and then he almost seemed to be working with you. You must have known the attack was coming at the end, but we could see that you'd saved hybrids. You had about 2 more hybrids than he had going into the final couple of laps. That, I guess, was the plan, because as the lead car around here, you need to have something to negate that advantage that the car behind has in the slipstream.
Yeah, I was trying to get him to use his deployment. It was a tough gig. I see Kyle and the rest coming up from behind us, so I didn't want to battle too much of Eric. So we sort of just traded places a little bit. We weren't going to fight each other too much, and then as I see the timer count down, it just managed to cross the line just as I knew it would come down to last lap. So I thought, right, this is it. I've got a couple of deployments left, so let's use them.
Well, it worked absolutely brilliantly for you. You got the race win, not even in the top 5 a week ago at Laguna Seca either. So nice to see you refining the form that we know you have. And as a result, not only do you get the maximum points haul, not only does it help your championship fight, but more importantly, the vote has been done and we've all decided that you are the driver of the race as well. So congratulations, Joel. The driver of the race medal will be finding its way to you after that really brilliantly thought out drive.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Joel Lask then with the race victory. Second place for Eric Axelson though, which means that, Jack, for the second week in a row, you actually get to have a chat with him.
I do indeed. I'm looking forward to it because, Eric, I won't lie, I've got a notebook here and I want you to take me step by step how you get an MX5 off the line.
I don't know. I don't know. Just I don't know. Full throttle.
Full throttle. Okay, yeah. So I'm only doing 50% throttle through the race, so that'll help me. You see, that's the secret. That was an electric start. Let's be honest. I mean, we were even I was theorising there might even be a jump start, to be honest, from you. But when you looked in your mirrors going into turn 1, and you saw that there was a second gap between you and second place, that must be a pretty nice feeling.
Yeah, the start was, as you say, it was perfect, you know, and. I used a couple of hybrids on the first lap to try to get away from the pack, and it kind of worked for for a few laps. And then I saw Joel started to creeping up on me. He had such a good race pace, and yeah, he was really fast.
I was going to say, we'll get on to the hybrids in a minute because obviously, like Andy's just alluded to, talking to Joel, there was a little bit of a disparity towards the end between the two of you. What was the difference, do you think, in terms of race pace? I'm obviously not going to ask for your setup, but do you have a qualifying setup and do you have a race setup? Do you reckon one was just maybe not quite as refined as the other, or did you sort of go into the race with the qualifying setup and maybe it dropped off? What's the sort of thinking?
I mean, no, they are practically the same except for fuel. So
yeah,
no, it's not that. But I don't know. I have some extra. I have some extra ballast. I don't know if it affects the maybe the wear of the tires. So in the end of the stint, maybe I was a little slower. I don't know really, but Joel was really fast.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, actually, because we mentioned the extra ballast that you had in the car at the beginning of qualifying. Then you put it on poles, so we basically thought, oh, it hasn't made any difference. We won't talk about it again. And all of a sudden, yeah, you're probably right. It's probably something that really we should have noted on earlier, because around here, that extra ballast, you probably did feel it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, as I said, in the end of the stints, start to, like, but noticing it more when the car starts to slide around. And when Joel was closing up, I was like, I can try to fend him off, but then like Kyle, he would, I think he would catch us really quickly. So I thought, if you can't like beat him, join him. So I tried to push him along instead.
Yeah, I love that. If you can't beat him, join him. Let's just get the 1-2 between us. Well, that was brilliant, Eric. A fantastic race. Obviously, 2 second place and a race victory, 2 pole positions. 1 fastest lap last week as well. He didn't quite get the fastest lap this week, but it's still been a very strong start for you at the beginning of this MX5 championship. Thank you very much for having a chat to us, and hopefully we'll speak to you next time.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Congrats, Eric, on the second place in that race. Third place, about the loneliest man in the race, really, I think, was Kyle Felvis there. We mentioned, Kyle, towards the end of the race that you weren't catching the leaders, you weren't being caught by the cars behind. I suppose it gave you a fairly stress-free end to the race, but you'd have rather been in the fight, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty lonely race. After lap 1, it was just Nicky, because I sort of sacrificed my start. Tried to bump Nicky so we didn't get jumped and we could try to work together. But then it sort of all messed up and he got overtaken a bit and then it was just a bit lonely.
Yeah, and that's tricky, isn't it? Especially for a driver like yourself and most of the grid, to be honest, who are used to 15, 20-minute sprints. That's where these longer races really can become a challenge, because your mind can wander, consistency becomes really key, and you don't really have anyone else to gauge your pace off. So doing things like managing tyres can be tricky as well. Do you feel that that's something that actually maybe a race like that can help you with in the future? Because you've got a bit of experience of that now.
Yeah, I mean, endurance is I don't really enjoy, but I think me, Nikki, and Jens are all in a voice call together at the same time, so that helps a lot because we can just talk and chat about anything in the 40 minutes. But if I was on my own, I think it would be a lack of concentration near the end.
Yeah, true. I mean, you couldn't afford to relax there because you did have them chasing you down behind, and there was actually a lap or so where you were perhaps catching the race lead. Your pace is certainly there, isn't it? I think if you'd have had the slipstream of the leaders, you'd have been every bit as fast as them. How confident are you can maybe break through and get another race win next week at Kota?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident. It's a sprint race, so should be much more enjoyable in that sense that we're going to be battling a lot more. And Kota's a very technical track sort of thing. You've got a lot of fast flowing corners, so should be good.
Looking forward to it. Carl, congratulations. Another good points haul here tonight. Well done on the podium.
Thanks, Andy.
So Carl Felvis then rounds out our podium finishers after that really long, grueling 40-minute race that the drivers have just endured, and they come out on top with a championship situation, I'm sure, that is a little bit closer than it was coming in. And Jack, I enjoyed that. I've always said I enjoyed the tactical element of these longer races, and that certainly was an entertaining race. It had its tactical moments. It had a really close finish there between the top two. And speaking of close, Jack, it has definitely made a difference to the top of the points table.
It absolutely has, hasn't it? With Joel Lask now on top of the points table. I mean, if anybody put money on that beforehand, I take my hat off to you, because that was not expected, as I've said many a time. He's got 55 points, one ahead of our previous championship leader, Eric Axelsson. So those two certainly, well, they're not pulling away from each other, and they're not pulling away from Carl Felvis. A fair few podiums for him now. Means 47 points. Slow and steady sometimes win the race. He's certainly not slow. He is going steady, though, to be fair to Kyle. A first place, obviously, as well, last time out. So he's clearly, as long as the circuit matches up with his racing style, potentially we can see him right at the top again. Elliot Dalton-Ayres still in fourth place, quite surprisingly, considering he didn't race in that 40-minute session then. Not sure how that one's going to be resolved. We'll have to wait and see to next week. Josh Martin with 36 points now. He's in fifth place. Probably after that fourth place in that race, probably thinking he should be moving a little bit further up, maybe trying to challenge for the top three. Just needs to get the car underneath him. And Nicky Taylor dropping down into seventh. Not ideal for him, obviously. And you can see all the way down to 14th place as well. But a really nice close championship, Andy. It sets up the circuit of the Americas. It sets up the rest of the season. We're now 2 rounds into this particular season. And I have to say, the plot is starting to thicken.
Is indeed, and worth mentioning, apologies actually if you did just mention this, Jack, but as always, the chat are far more on the ball than we are. These championship standings are each driver's best round only. We are already taking the drop score into account, so it will look a little bit confusing. It'll change a lot over these early weeks, but once we take each driver's best score from the first two, the way it looks. And it goes to show, actually, the effect that drop scores have, because you'd have thought that Axelsson and Lask would be a country mile ahead of anybody else, but actually the drop score situation already starting to do its thing and closing things up not quite nicely. So looking forward to the next round of racing then here, on the VRRC, which will be coming from the Circuit of the Americas, another really long and challenging circuit, back to the shorter sprint race format for that one, so the 2 20-minute races. But that, Jack, is not all that's coming up here on the VRRC, because I believe we might have a shiny new graphic to have a look at now that tells us everything that you can either participate in or spectate on here at the VRRC, and Jack can talk us through it.
Yeah, this basically does my job for me. We'll go for the top left graphic first, shall we? And that's obviously what you've seen tonight. The VRRC and Mazda MX5 with Hybrid USA Tour happening every Wednesday at the same time, the same place. And we've been speaking about it for the last 2 hours and last week as well. So if you don't know what that is, I can't really help you with any more information than what we've already said. Top right then, time attack leagues. Now, this is a very interesting one. We're going through all the different single-seater formulas, and we're going to some of the iconic tracks as well. Imola, Melbourne, Baku, Silverstone, Spa, and Canada in a variety of F4, F3, F2, F1, old F1 style, a slightly older F1 style again, and then the modern day F1 as we hit into Canada. So that's a really cool idea for a time attack league, in my opinion. It's not just the same car on different circuits. You get a different car, you have to put some time and practice into it, and it's just good fun as well. Everybody likes driving the old F1 cars. You got the fun races down the bottom left. That's a pick and mix. We're in a police car around the Nürburgring, because of course we are. That's on Sunday. Whatever idiot decided to choose that one. It's a vote, so there's clearly a collection of idiots somewhere out there who wants to drive a police van around the Nürburgring. I can't even imagine driving a race car around the Nürburgring is fun, but there we go. Some people are out there. And then obviously there's the free roam. This is one of the new servers that the VRRC have got working on, and it's effectively, if you're a member of the VRRC, you can jump into this server at any point with any of your friends. You can drive any of the cars that are on there as well, and that is effectively just driving up and down mountain roads. It's effectively a place where you can chill out. I would probably use it to sort of listen to podcasts, and if you're unable to drive or you just can't afford fuel these days, which isn't something to be ashamed of because it is ludicrous, and you just want to chill out, have a little bit of a relax, listen to a book, listen to music or anything, then the free roam server is absolutely spot on where you need to be, because as I said, join in with a couple of mates and chill out down some mountain roads. And that is all we've got going on at VRRC. I say all we've got going on. There's plenty there to get your teeth stuck into.
Certainly is, yes, and lots there. And this, of course, continues on all year round as well. Whether we've got a championship on that we're broadcasting, you can still take part in all of this stuff. So definitely something as we head into the winter months that I'm going to try and get and be a part of as well. So, yeah, lots of action here on the VRRC. The time attack round, as Jack was saying, with the single-seaters. I think that fun race, actually, I think they've gone for something different now with the Porsches, but certainly the time attack round, they are on their first round still, or is this perhaps out of date? I think we may well be on the second round now, mightn't we? Because we're on the 14th of September now, which was the circuit I can't remember from the previous graphic. Oh, it is still the first round. Okay, I'm stand corrected. So we're at Imola then still until this Friday. There we go. It changes around on the end of this week. So Imola in the Formula 4 car. So that's going to be a very, very exciting one. And then also the fun races, like I said, the fun races going down to a vote, or like Jack said, the drivers, the members of the Discord putting in a vote, choosing the car and the track they want to race at. It was the Transit van a week ago, and now I think they've gone for Porsches around Baku for the next week of the fun races. So plenty to get yourself involved in there. Well, that though I think is all we have time for here on the VRRC this week. Jack, fantastic race again. I particularly do enjoy these longer races. It was nice there to see a tactical race win from Joel Ladd. That's kind of what we hoped for with these longer pit stop races, and he played the strategy to perfection.
He absolutely did, yeah. It's one of those things where 40 minutes is... they could have done it without the pit stops, but the fact that we've put the mandatory pit stops in means that there's just that extra little bit of something to think about, isn't it? And Joel, with the hybrid system, played it to perfection. Can't wait to see what they get up to at the next endurance event. And obviously, next week, we're visiting the Circuit of the Americas for 2 sprint events. So if that is your preferred format, then you're in luck, because we're back there again.
Indeed so. Right then, well, thank you everyone for joining us and getting involved with the broadcast. I've been Andy McEwan. It's been Jack Oliphant alongside me in the comms box. Big thanks as well to Lewis and Rich from the VRRC for directing and then putting on the championship, respectively. And we'll look forward to working with them again in a week's time. As Jack said, we're at Circuit of the Americas for rounds 4 and 5 of the AGON by AOC Mazda MX5 Cup, and we will see you again then.
Woo!